Hello and welcome to this short video on introducing the humanities. First of all, I think we need to define exactly what the humanities are. And it's a little difficult because the humanities are such a broad area of human creativity and study that it can be a little overwhelming. However, I think we can point to the types of things that are part of the humanities and therefore find out a little bit better what they are. So for instance, you have philosophy, history, the visual arts, literature, and even the social sciences. You can contrast this with mathematics and the hard sciences like physics, chemistry, and biology. And one thing that comes out as a difference between these two is that the sciences in particular are the study of the structure of things, apart from human consciousness and human life. And one thing that the humanities can do for us is give us a way to look at our values and to have these values then guide us when it comes to science. For instance, science creates new technologies that are sometimes questionable, like for instance the atomic bomb. And it's really up to the humanities to provide us with a way of looking at our values and using those values to guide those technological advancements and how we use them. So how do we look at our values through the humanities? Well, one way we can do this is through the arts, which is what we focus on in this course. And the arts can reveal to us the values that we live by, the values that we hope for, as well as the values that we strive for. And I think that one way we do this is through criticism. And what we really need to do when we're critically analyzing works of art is look for how they affect us, how they can reveal to us our greatest desires, our greatest needs, our greatest hopes for the future. And all of these things are in the great works of art. And once we approach them with criticism, we can begin to appreciate them more and gain insight into them, and hopefully become better people and grow because of it. Now, I want you to approach criticism a little skeptically in this course, because as we've all experienced at some point or another, critics can be off-putting, right? They can sometimes seem to know it all. They can sometimes tell us what we should like when we don't really like it. And sometimes criticism can be just a little, beyond us in some ways. So, approach it skeptically. Don't necessarily take everything that the critic says as gospel truth. However, I think at the same time, we do need to appreciate criticism for what it can do for us. It can provide us background information that we need to fully appreciate the work of art. It can give us insight in some ways that we might not have been able to get on our own. And criticism, generally speaking, should be approached with an open mind. We should allow ourselves to learn from it, but at the same time, don't always agree with it, because we may, in fact, have other things that we bring to our critical reflection on the piece of art, and these can be just as valid. Let's take a look at these cave paintings from 35,000 years ago and just comment briefly on what they can reveal to us about our values and the way we live. One of the things that you might not know about these cave paintings is that they were thought to be part of a religious ritual in which the hunters would gather in the caves by the light of a torch, perhaps, and use these cave paintings as sort of magical talismans that they would then, use for practice in throwing their spears, or perhaps in allowing them to get in touch with the animal spirit and therefore hunt them better. I think one of the things that we can get out of these cave paintings is the majesty of the creatures being depicted, of the importance of them in nature to these prehistoric human beings. And I think one of the things that we can appreciate that is perhaps a universal value in these things is that nature is a force to be reckoned with. Nature is something that has to be respected in some fashion. And in order to get a control over it, to partake of it as these hunters were going to, we need to somehow visualize it. We need to appreciate it in its aesthetic glory. And I think that's what they do here. The religious ritual is meant to help the hunt, but in some ways it also makes them conscious of the power and beauty of nature. And one of the things that we need to do, I think, in this course is when we experience something like the cave paintings, we should ask ourselves, how does this speak to us? What can we get out of this that perhaps isn't necessarily something that we normally get out of it just from looking at it, but something that we deeply reflect upon and that comes out of our experience of the work of art. So looking at these things helps us become more sensitive to values, and through that sensitivity to values, we can hopefully apply it to our life and perhaps understand more of what makes us tick as human beings. You may not know this, but every human civilization has been an art-making civilization. So in some fashion, art making is just a behavior of human beings. It's something that we do, it's something that we engage in without really thinking about it, instinctually. And I think this means that art has a very important place in our lives and that we really can't do without it. Now, of course, taste in art is something of a controversial subject because taste is completely subjective, as we all know. There's no accounting for taste, as people say. But even though taste is subjective, I want to make the point that taste is not unfounded. It's something that we can have better or worse justification for. It's something that we can provide evidence for based on the work of art itself. And it's something that can be cultivated, and it's something that we must cultivate if we're to be truly appreciative of the art that we experience. I think that developing taste is one of the foremost reasons why we get an education in the humanities. And I think that if you're here, then you want to be this type of person who cultivates their taste. So I invite you to take a look at the artworks in our text and in this course and just sit with it a while. By cultivating our taste in artworks, we cultivate ourselves. And this is something that I think you'll start to realize the more that you look at artworks and the more that you appreciate them and become more of a critic. Not only do we cultivate ourselves when we develop our taste, I think we also cultivate an appreciation for others and other points of view in the world. Artworks have a unique ability to give us insight into worldviews and to ways in which humanity has viewed itself and nature. So this is something that's very important, I think, and is one of the benefits of appreciating the arts. Now, critics can help us in several ways. First of all, they can provide us with background information that we might not otherwise have had when we view a work of art. They can also provide us with structural information about a work of art. When you take a look at something like the Mona Lisa, one of the things that I think stands out to me as a critic, but which may not be obvious to you, is the fact that the horizon line behind the Mona Lisa's head is impossible. I mean, you look at it and they don't meet up on either side of her. There's a valley with a river on the one side, and there's a high plateau on the other. So what exactly is going on here? Why did Leonardo da Vinci decide to put that in there? And one of the interpretations that I've noted, and that seems interesting to me, even though I don't necessarily buy it, is that the Mona Lisa represents Mother Nature. And the fact that these horizon lines don't meet up in the background suggests that nature is sort of mysterious, that it involves itself in, if not impossibilities, then sort of cataclysmic uncertainties. So Mona Lisa's smile, the mysterious smile, perhaps it's Mother Nature smiling at us, saying that it won't reveal its secrets easily to us. So I think this is one way in which we might appreciate a work like the Mona Lisa and get to know a little bit more about it through some structural information that isn't necessarily obvious upon first viewing. Knowing certain things about works of art helps us change our perception of the works of art. And perception, just like taste, must be cultivated. And one way in which we can cultivate this is through the study of artistic form. And artistic form is basically the formal elements of a piece of work that comment upon something, some subject matter, that reveal a content or what it is about, in other words. And artistic form can be either complex or simple, perhaps minimalist, or any other variety of things. Artistic form is really the meat of the work of art. It's something that we can focus on as a critic and even describe rather, objectively in some ways. And yet it can be essential to understanding what the artist possibly meant and how we might interpret the work of art. Well, that's about all the time we have for this little lecture, but I think if you take away nothing else from it, one thing that you should really focus on is that the arts and the humanities and their criticism help us become better reasoners. They help us to see beyond the surface of the artwork to something deeper and to something more meaningful. And it really helps us reason, right? It helps us reason about our values. And of course, our values, really, there's nothing more important in human life than those because they are what shape how we live and they are shaping how we live at this very moment. Thank you, and see you soon.